Hey guys, it's Zach. I don't really know if I should say Zach or Zach is diabetic because Zach is diabetic is my channel name. I don't know. I think I'm just gonna stick with hey, it's Zach, but you guys can let me know what you think if I should say Zach is diabetic or just plain Zach. So I did upload a video about my diagnosis story, but I didn't really remember a lot because I was so young. So I have since then talked to a couple people who were there, knew more of what was going on. So I deleted that diagnosis story and now I'm uploading this new one. So I was diagnosed in May of 1995 when I was 6 years old. Um, my aunt on my biological dad's side is also a type 1 diabetic, so it runs in our family. My doctors have since said they think that with mine, it like skips a generation. So if I were to have kids, my kids wouldn't get it, my grandkids would. But they said, that's what we think. It may not be accurate, but there you go. So I guess from what I was told, what it was, because like I said, I was very young. I remember bits and pieces, but I don't really remember a lot of it. It was a month after I turned 6. I had turned 6 on April 19th, and then in May I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So it was like a month after I turned 6, a little less than a month. So I do have some memories, but not a lot. So I guess from what I got from people I had talked to, my symptoms were I was obviously drinking a lot, going to the bathroom a lot, and I was very tired all the time. And they said they had noticed this for about a couple of weeks. My mom had mentioned it to my grandma, my mom's mom, about how I was going to the bathroom a lot. And when I was a younger kid, I liked a lot of attention. I still like to be the center of attention. So my grandma kind of thought I was just doing it, like asking to go to the bathroom and stuff in the middle of the night just for attention. Because I was kind of a hypochondriac when I was little as well. Like I always said I was sick and I didn't feel good, stuff like that. So I really don't blame them for that because I mean, it's how I was most of the time. But I guess really where my mom really started looking at it differently was when I was younger. I used to go to my biological dad's mom's, my other grandma. It was pretty much every weekend I went. I'm still close to her to this day, to both my grandparents, but I'm very close to I don't have a relationship with my biological dad. That's my choice. I don't really want to talk about it, but I haven't talked to him in years and years and years, and I want to keep it that way. So my stepdad is who I consider my father. So anyways, but it's good that like my grandma D always did never like forced it to me to have a relationship with him, and she was always good to my mom as well. So I was very close to her. And I would go to her house every weekend. When I was younger, up until about a couple years ago, they had a camp on a lake around where we live. And they would go there during the summer, stay there the whole summer, and then they would go back to their house after summer ended. So one weekend, I went to camp, and normally when I was there, I would go fishing, and, I was active and everything. But this weekend, I was I had no energy. I slept the whole weekend, and my grandma was kind of like freaked out because I was a very hyper kid. I was very active and energetic, and I constantly was on the go, and I would wake up early and I was on the go all the time. I was very hyper when I was a child. And so it was very odd for me to just not want to do anything and just lay on the couch all day and sleep. Like, that just was not like me. So when my mom came and picked me up, And my grandma also had noticed that I was drinking a lot of water and going to the bathroom a lot. You think she would have kind of picked up because my aunt, who's diabetic, is her daughter, but she didn't really, I guess, really think about it that much. Like, it didn't really click in her head, which I totally understand. So when my mom came to pick me up and stuff, she kind of, like, mentioned it to my mom, and my grandma, I love her to death, but she kind of has a tendency of kind of like overthinking things a little bit. And she was like, I think he might have leukemia, which I did not have leukemia. But anyways, that was what she thought I had. But, you know, grandma's love. So anyways, so my mom brought me home and stuff. And I guess like for a couple of days, same thing. And then when my mom really got nervous was I started peeing my pants. I was drinking so much and having to go to the bathroom so much that I was unable to make it to the bathroom. I started peeing my pants, and then I was very sick. I started throwing up, and I had no energy. I could barely move. And, like, I hadn't been in school for a while because when I was in school, they said I couldn't, like, I was falling asleep, like, and I was in kindergarten at the time. So I was, like, falling asleep, and it was bad. So my mom she told my other grandma, her mom, and my grandma was like, you need to bring him to the doctors. Like, this isn't like him. This is not normal. So my mom brought me to the doctors, and they like took my urine and everything like that and my blood, and they said, we will get the results, and if we find anything, we will call you back. And my mom did say that they, like, when she has told me this story before, that they never really said to her, we think your son may be diabetic, but I'm assuming that they kind of thought that, but they didn't want to scare us in case I didn't have it, so they sent us home, because I didn't go to the hospital, I just went to a regular doctor's office, like, I'm assuming my pediatrician. And so my mom said it was around 9 o'clock that night. They called my house, and my mom answered, and they said, hi, we believe that your son is a type 1 diabetic. You need to come to the hospital. My mom was like, oh, okay, tomorrow morning? And they were like, no, right now. Like, you need to come now. His blood sugar is extremely high. And so I had a younger sister at the time. She was 1 year old. So my mom called our neighbor, who my mom was friends with, and asked if she could watch her. And so my grandma Bev, my mom's mom, came. We went to the hospital. And I do kind of remember it there. I remember going into the emergency room, and it seemed very, very bright in there to me. I remember them putting me on the bed, and a doctor coming in, and I was very nervous. I remember being very nervous, and, like, I didn't know what was going on. And I remember they gave me this water type stuff. It was like a thick water. I think it's like a sugary water, and they wanted me to drink it because they wanted to see if my body could take care of the glucose in there. So they gave it to me, and I remember it tasted fucking disgusting. And so I drank it. My body did not take care of the insulin, or take care of the sugar. And by this time, the people I talked to said that my grandma Dee, my real dad's grandma, or mom, was there, my grandpa, her husband, and then my grandma Bev, my mom, they were all there. And I do remember them trying to put the IVs in me, and I was fighting the nurses and doctors. I didn't want to do it. So I do remember, like, my grandpa, and I can't remember the other person, but my grandpa had to hold my arms down, and I remember somebody holding my legs down, so they could put the IV in. So apparently they said when they had tested my blood then, my blood sugar was about 897. It was almost 900. And for people who aren't diabetic out there, normal for a person without diabetes should be between 80 and 120. And mine was almost 900. It was 897. So mine was very, very high. So, where I'm from, it's a very, very, very small town. And the hospital I was at was about 30 minutes away. And they're a very small hospital as well. So they didn't really they didn't have a doctor there that specialized in juvenile diabetes and type 1 diabetes. So I had to get transferred to a hospital that was like 2.5 hours away. And since it was such a small hospital, they didn't have like a helipad or helicopters to come. So I had to ride by ambulance. And I remember being in the ambulance, and I remember the ambulance driver and the other EMT, she was so nice. And I remember the ambulance driver was wicked nice. And I remember the ride being extremely bumpy, and they were going very fast. And surprisingly, I was not in a coma. They were worried that I was going to slip into a coma. So the ambulance driver and the other EMT kept talking to me and having me talk. And then from what I was told, when I got to the hospital, I was starting to slip into like a semi-coma, starting to drift off, but I never fully went into a coma. I was just kind of like drifting off, waking back up. But by the time I got to the hospital, my blood sugar was 1190, so 1120. And it was insane. I remember just feeling like crap, and I was scared, and I didn't know what was going on, and I remember getting hooked up to the insulin when I got there, and the room I was in was... I had a roommate in there, and this is very sad. He was around my age. He might have been a year older than me, a year or two older than me. I can't quite remember, and my mom couldn't remember either. But he had leukemia, and I remember I spent, I think, 2 nights in that room with him, and I remember them coming in the middle of the night, and him just screaming and stuff from all the shots. And my mom said that I was very upset, and I felt like I really wasn't that sick because I started to feel better and I didn't understand. And I've always had a good heart, even since when I was little. My mom said I just cried because I felt so bad for that other little guy in there, and like I don't know what happened to him to this day. But I remember they moved me out of the room, and because my mom was like, it's very upsetting to him. It's, this is traumatic as it is. And so I got moved to another room, and I do remember, like, going into, like, the kids' playroom they had. And them, like, I remember in there, like, this is going to show how old I am, but they had, like, Super Nintendos in there, and, like, that was the brand new thing. So I was, like, playing Super Nintendo. I, like, loved it. And then I was in the hospital for about 3 or 4 days, I believe. And then I remember, like, before we left, I remember going into a room with, like, I'm assuming it was a diabetes educator, and she was teaching my mom and me, not really me, but my mom, how to fill up my shots and how to do insulin shots and prick my finger and, like, setting up a diet and everything, because when I was first diagnosed, they didn't have, like, Lantus or Levemir or Toujeo or any type of, like, 24-hour long-acting insulin. They just had... I was on regular and NPH, which I had to take 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. And I had to take it 30 minutes before I ate anything to have it, like, give time to do it into my system. And my mom said that I was a trooper. Like, I was great. And I've always remembered doing my own shots. My mom said we got home from the hospital. She didn't let me fill them up, but she said when we got home from the hospital, she filled up my first shot, and I said, Mommy, I want to do it. I want to give myself my shot. I don't want you to do it. So my mom was like, okay, and she gave it to me, and she said the first time we got home to give myself my shot, I put it in me, and she's like, you did it, and you were fine. So I've always, like, given myself my own shots, which I think that's kind of cool for, like, a like, fresh 6-year-old to, like, be perfectly fine with, like, stabbing myself with needles. Like, I think that's kind of cool. So, and I remember, like, I was still in kindergarten. It wasn't that, because, where I'm live in New York, so our school goes until June, almost the end of June. So I remember, like, I didn't go into school for full day. I would go in after lunchtime, so I didn't have to do any shots while I was at school. So the nurse, like, didn't have to give me any shots. So I remember I only went in for the last part of the day. I would go in around, like, 11:30 noon. And My kindergarten teacher was mean as hell. Like, very mean. I have no idea why she was a kindergarten teacher because she was extremely mean. I remember her taunting me because I was diabetic. Like, this just shows what a fucking bitch she was. Like, I remember one time, this was like almost when school was out, and it, like, I don't know if they really do this anymore. I know we don't do it in my classroom, but back then, somebody would bring, like, a student would bring in snacks every day, a different person, and then one of the days in the week it would be the teacher's turn as well to bring a snack. And I remember she brought in Rice Krispie treats, and this was after I was diagnosed. And I remember she made me stand up in front of everybody, and she was like, "Oh, Zach can't have Rice Krispie treats because he's diabetic, so he can't have sugar." And she was like, "Let's all look at him and say, 'Aw.'" And I remember that, and it traumatized me. I remember she picked up my Rice Krispie treat that would have been for me, and she threw it in the garbage in front of me too, and said, "Well, I guess this is gonna go in the trash because you can't have it." And this was my kindergarten teacher. Like, what the fuck? And I remember I tried to sneak over. Like, it's kind of embarrassing, but like, it's also sad that she did this to me. I remember I tried to sneak over to the garbage and, like, because I felt like a piece of shit because everybody was enjoying their Rice Krispie treats and I was sitting there with nothing. So I remember I got up and I tried to sneak over to the garbage to sneak some of it out. And then she saw me doing it and she was like, "Oh, Zach's trying to eat out of the garbage." Like, my fucking kindergarten teacher. Like, bring me in some motherfucking crackers or something. Like, she ended up getting fired years later, but that's a different story. But yeah, she was a bitch. And then I remember my kindergarten graduation. This was the first time I ever had a low blood sugar. My mom said she thinks it was because I was so excited and stuff about my graduation that day that I didn't really eat a lot of breakfast. And she had given me my insulin 30 minutes before, and I didn't really eat what she gave me for breakfast because I was excited. And I remember being on stage, and I had like I had a couple talking parts during the graduation. And I remember like going up and doing like my first talking part, and I started to kind of like tear up and like my voice cracked, like I was gonna start crying. And then I remember I was sitting up on the stage, and actually the video, like my mom's friend came and she had a video camera, so she was videotaping it. And so I remember sitting up there and I felt funny and I started crying. And on the videotape, you can hear my mom trying to go, Colleen's my mom. She's like, "Colleen, I think Zach's crying up there. Is he okay?" Because, like, this is 95, and, like, a lot of people still to this day, a lot of people are not educated on diabetes at all, especially type 1 diabetes. My biggest pet peeve is when somebody says to me, "Do you have the good or the bad kind?" There is no good diabetes, but whatever. So I remember we had like a classroom helper. She was like a teacher's aide. So she came onto the stage because I was sitting in my chair and like there was like a little talking part going on with the other students. And she took me off the stage, and my mom, my grandma D, and my grandma Bev brought me to the nurse's office, and they pricked my finger, and my blood sugar was low. And like after the graduation, we would go into the gym in our school, and there was like refreshments and stuff. So the nurse was like, "Take him into the gym and have him, eat a brownie, eat something sweet to get his blood sugar up." That's why I was crying and stuff, because I felt weird because my blood sugar was low and I didn't know what was going on. I still, like, sometimes if my blood sugar gets low enough, I still to this day will start crying. And so I went into the gym, and this just shows too, like, what a fucking bitch my kindergarten teacher was. I was in there, and I started eating the brownie, and the other kids started filing in, because it was, like, right towards the end of graduation. Like, it was almost over. And my kindergarten teacher came in when all the other parents were coming in, and she came in and said, "What in the hell is the matter with you? You ruined the whole graduation," and like was yelling at me because of my medical condition that made my blood sugar go low. Mind you, I had only been diabetic for about a month, and I'm 6 years old, and she's yelling at me for something I had no control over. And I remember my grandma, I'll never forget this. My grandma's pretty much a sweet little old lady. She got pissed. I remember she pinned my kindergarten teacher up against the gym wall and was like, I don't know who in the hell you think you're talking to. My grandson is diabetic. This is not his fault. His sugar went low. Like, it was crazy. Like, I had some other same type of situations like that going through school, but it was because, like, the adults and stuff were uneducated back then, and some of them still are with some of the questions I get. But anyways, that was my diagnosis story. I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm really good now. I'm so happy, actually, that I did grow up with diabetes, because I don't ever remember not being diabetic, so I never really had to make a big... I mean, I'm sure I did when I was younger, but I don't remember ever having to make a huge lifestyle change. Like, I've just grown up diabetic, and I've never known any different. So, I'm thankful for that. 'Cause, like, people who are diagnosed as teenagers or even older, like, I feel bad because they really need it. Like, they knew what it was like not to be diabetic. I never knew. Like, I mean, I was until I was 6, but I don't really remember. I don't remember not being diabetic. But my other grandma to this day still thinks it, like, feels bad that my sugar was so high. She was like, the day before we found out, I gave you a huge piece of cake, we had ice cream, all this. I'm like, Grandma, it's not your fault, you didn't know I was diabetic. Like, but anyways, that's it for my updated diagnosis story. I hope you all will enjoy it, whoever watches, and have a fantastic day.